Welcome to Maritime Matters, a podcast focused on leaders in the maritime market, the people, the companies, the technologies that are making and breaking the news, helping to lead the maritime industry to a safer, more efficient, more profitable, and cleaner future. Welcome aboard. This is Greg Troutwine with Maritime Matters, the Marinelink Podcast, and we're very pleased today to be joined by George Whittier, CEO, Fairbanks Morse Defense, to discuss the rapid evolution of this company in the last 5 years. Personally, I've been covering the maritime market as editor of Maritime Reporter and Engineering News for more than 30 years, and not long ago, if someone had uttered Fairbanks Morse, to me, my immediate thought was diesel engine manufacturer. But earlier this year in July, I had the opportunity to visit Beloit, Wisconsin, home of Fairbanks Morse for more than 150 years. Trust when I say engine manufacturing is still a core business. Just with the privatization of this company in 2020 and under the leadership of George Whittier, the FMD story has gotten very broad and very interesting quickly. And today, FMD is a diverse and growing power across multiple sectors with all eyes focused on being the Navy supplier of choice. So George, first and foremost, welcome to the Maritime Matters, the Marinelink Podcast.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me. It's a real honor to be on, and hopefully your audience will appreciate this and see what we have to say.
Okay. So, George, we have a lot of ground to cover, and I know your schedule is perpetually busy. So let's start out with your leadership at FMD. You originally joined Fairbanks Morse in 2009. You left in 2012, but you retook the helm in 2020. Quite simply, why did you leave in the first place? And more importantly, what drew you back?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So, when I left, it was really just time to leave. I think things have a season. And so I left in 2012. I went and I ran a couple, and at the time I left, I was actually kind of sad about it. I was like, boy, I really love this company. I love the products, love the people, I love the market, I love the opportunity really to kind of feel like I'm serving. One of the biggest regrets in my life ever is that I didn't serve. And so by doing the job I'm doing at Fairbanks Morse, being such an integral supplier to the Navy and the Coast Guard, it's really given me that kind of like almost that feeling of serving. And of course, the people in uniform, it's not even close to the same thing. But for me, it's a way to kind of give back. So I left the company. I went. I ran a couple other companies, and then in December of 2019. And at that time, Fairbanks Morse it was mainly the engine company, and it was part of Enpro Industries, which was a bigger public company, and they didn't really know what to do with it. And so they decided to sell it into a private equity company called Arcline. And then when that happened, Arcline said, hey, George, you used to run the company. Would you be willing to come back? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. I'd be happy to do that. And so the day the transaction was announced in January 2020 was also my first day back to the company. And it's kind of been off to the races ever since.
Part of my job is to stay on top of and preferably ahead of industry trends. But I must admit that, the rapid expansion of FMD, my mergers and acquisitions starting in 2020 took me by surprise. As one day I saw what was a diesel engine manufacturer, as I said before, and I glanced again and here was a burgeoning defense conglomerate. Can you talk a bit more about the strategy behind FMD's growth, mentioning what you see as the key pivot points along the way?
Yeah, that's a great question, Greg. And actually, I get this question a lot in the industry. And I think, so go back to when Fairbanks Morse was part of the public company. And I use the old phrase, like if all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, right? And that's the only tool you have. So at that point in time, as you've mentioned a few times, we were an engine company. And so the challenges that we had, we said, well, we just have to go sell more engines. And with the acquisition by Arcline and then me coming back to the company, we really had it's like the phrase where you change your lens, change your perspective. What we said is this actually isn't an engine company, which is a little bit radical. What we really are is a critical supplier to the Navy. And so with that as a guiding light, then we said to ourselves, well, if we're a critical supplier to the Navy, then we should be selling other critical equipment. And then that's put us on the path then of making these acquisitions, building the company to where we are today. So with the Rolls-Royce acquisition, that's our 13th. It obviously won't close until sometime next year. But that's a pretty significant run in just about a 4-year period of time. And we've added a lot of really clear capabilities. So we have motors, we have controllers, we have valves, we have elevators, we have davits, we have electrical hardware, we have fittings. I mean, I'm missing some of the products and offering that we have. But our goal in mind is what are the critical things that we need to build a ship and service that ship over a 40-year period of time, the life of the ship. And then how do we become the most critical supplier to enable that to happen? And I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that over the last couple of years.
As I referenced in my intro, I had a fantastic trip this year to Beloit, and I was hosted in world-class fashion by your marketing team and specifically by Pat Busey and Keith Hassel.
Yeah.
Not only did I get a behind-the-scenes look at the condition critical manufacturing facility that's central to our nation's defense, the big heavy machinery that keeps U.S. Navy ships running. I also had the chance to step into your client-facing R&D demo center and clumsily, fix an engine with the augmented reality headset. So, in my 30 years traveling the globe to shipyards and equipment manufacturers, I've seen my fair share of company slogans. But FMD's stuck with me because as
Yeah.
Pat Busey was explaining it, I could see it in action all around. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about the integrity, velocity, and teamwork? What's that mean to you in real terms?
Yeah, so when I came back, it goes back to that January 2020, and I came back to the company. I gave a speech on my first day. I got all the employees together, and I just said, "Hey, here are the values that we're going to have to run the company." And there's kind of a longer speech for this. I'll try to shorten it a little bit, but I always start with like I like to do things in terms of three, and I always tell people, and it's true, I'm not the smartest guy out there by any stretch. And I can remember three things, right? And so I figure if I can remember three things, then everyone else can remember three things too. And what are those three critical things I want people to remember? And so it starts with integrity. Former Senator Alan Simpson had a great line. He said, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. And that really just resonated with me. When I left Fairbanks the first time and when I came back, one of the companies I worked for, which shall remain nameless, I quickly discovered they didn't have integrity, and I realized how important that is to me, and how I run my life and how I do things, not just at work but in my personal life as well. And so I just want that to be very clear that we're going to operate above board. We're going to, be honest, be respectful. We're going to admit our mistakes. We're going to fix problems when we have problems. We're going to be that good partner for our customers, our suppliers, and then our own teammates. And then that feeds into the third one, which is teamwork. And so if you have integrity and you have that sense of honor and respect, and you operate in a sense of teamwork, I always like to use sports analogies. Everyone, I say everyone, most people have played some level of sports, whether it was high school or a very fortunate few that played college. But you've been on winning teams and you've been on losing teams, and you know what a winning team looks like and feels like. A winning team is a team that works well together, and if you make a mistake, you have a bad play, you slap the guy on the butt and you're like, okay, shake it off, we'll get to the next one. And the locker room has a good feel to it. A losing team is a team where you're pointing fingers at each other and you're placing blame all the time, and the locker room doesn't feel good, right? You don't like each other, you don't work well together. And I said, we don't want that, right? We want a team that, hey, we're not going to win everything, but we're going to win as a team and we're going to lose as a team. And when we lose as a team, we're going to figure out what we did wrong and then we're going to fix it, right? Because we have integrity. We're not going to finger point, right? We're not going to be you see it on Sunday in NFL games all the time. Quarterback throws the ball, the wide receiver drops it, and the wide receiver is like, oh, you threw a bad pass. And the quarterback says, well, you should have caught that, right? And instead, what it's like, what you want to see is the receiver is like, sorry, my bad. Get me on the next one. And the quarterback says, don't worry about it, right? Yeah, we'll call the next play and it's coming your way, right? And that's what good teamwork is. And then the second value, even though I talk about it third, is really kind of the cornerstone for what we do here at Fairbanks Morse, and that's velocity. And I tell folks that we have to be decisive in what we do. And I talk about velocity as speed with a direction. And so we will make decisions when we have 80% of the information that we need, and then we course correct. And we know that we're going to make some mistakes because we're operating with 80%. But because we have integrity and because we have teamwork, we can course correct, solve those problems, and still get to the finish line, get to where we need to be before anyone else can get there. So we have gone and won projects. We've literally won projects. And I've had a competitor call me and tell me and say, you guys won that project before I knew there was a project. And the reason for that is because we're able to operate with velocity, in particular when it comes to our customers in the market. So all of that, if you put all that together, I think that's a bit of a key on how we work. I think a lot of companies, they have values, and they'll have 7 values or 9 values or something like that, and nobody knows what they are, right? They don't, right? They may say they do, but they don't. It's on a web page somewhere, and or it's on the back of someone's business card or something like that. But when you have three and you talk about them all the time, it resonates. And so when people are faced, my goal with this is when people are faced with a challenge, I want them to think, all right, well, what are the values? How are the values going to guide me in solving this problem? Right? And maybe we make a mistake. Well, we're going to then, okay, let's course correct on that mistake and solve that problem, and continue to go forward with our customer in mind. So far it's worked out pretty well for us. I've actually thought about writing a book on that. It's like, hey, values-based leadership or something along those lines, because it does seem to work, right? As you saw when you were here.
And I appreciate your comment on teamwork, because as you can see on the kit behind me, I am from the Ohio State University. So we don't drop passes, but that's neither here nor there. And I love your comment on integrity, because just from a small personal note, one of the best compliments I've ever received in my life. My son's now 28, but when he was in his teens, we both watched Game of Thrones together, like the
Oh
rest of the
yeah.
world. And we were talking one day about what character is more like you, what character is more like me. And I asked him, I'm like, Shane, what character is more like me? And I'm thinking one of the warriors, the boom, but and he mentioned it was a one of the grizzled old generals, Sir Davos, and or I think it was Sir Davos. Don't quote me on that, but I was crestfallen. I'm like, I
Yeah.
wanted to be the warrior, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why Sir Davos? He said he's honorable. and
Right.
that and so that obviously means a lot. So, talking about honorable, one of the things, and I'm generally a high energy person. When I met Pat Busey, I kind of felt like a low energy person. I
Yeah.
know he's a 40 plus year employee of the company,
Yeah.
and when he was
45.
energetic, I'm
Yeah.
sorry,
45. Yeah, he just
yeah.
celebrated 2 weeks ago. He just celebrated his 45th anniversary. Yeah, he started when he was 17, in the late summer, early fall of 1979.
It was funny. I was joking with Pat. I'm like, Pat, I said, man, you got more energy. He's obviously knowledgeable about the company. And we were just about to step into the virtual reality room. I said, Pat, before you retire, I said, they really need to make a virtual reality Pat
For
Busey,
Pat, yeah, exactly. And then
to
he can be
enter.
our tour guide. I've told him, I was like, even if he retires, he still has to come back and be like the tour guide. Like
Has
we're
to be.
not gonna, we're even if he's in a wheelchair, we're gonna make him do that. So he's the
Has to
best.
be.
Yeah.
Absolutely has to be. So, with that, and again, we've
Yep.
already talked a little bit about the technology, but you're surrounded by amazing technologies and technologists. We just had a cover story earlier this year with FMD's Trey Taylor. We were discussing digital twin technology.
Yep.
But when you look at this tech evolution, both inside and outside of FMD, is what one technology makes you sit back and say, "Wow."
Well, a couple of things, and so Greg, even if we take one step back, about 3 years ago, again, or even what you said all the way back in the beginning when you started this, you think of Fairbanks as this engine company, right? And it's old and metal and big and all of that. And probably 3 years ago, I think it was probably about 3 years ago, I was looking at the market, and we just came to a conclusion. We're like, we are missing out. There are technological plays here, and we should be able to have like kind of a technology wing within the company that can then kind of grow and expand and then help both internally, as well as then say what are some of the products that we can do. So what you just mentioned, the FM onboard, the virtual reality headset, the AI tools, the problem solving, the predictive maintenance that provides. That's an amazing tool set. I was just talking to our technology leader today, and he said we're rolling out 2 AI models right now. One of them is a large language model that we can use to help our customer service technical support folks be able to better diagnose problems in the field, be able to work more responsibly, more accurately with the customers, which I think is great. And then another tool that we have, that we're calling like a AI agent, again, just as a tool to help within customer service, inside sales, all of these things. So how do we get access to information? It kind of goes back to our values, right? How do we get access to information with more velocity so that we can get back to a customer with a good answer in a faster manner, all right? So that they can get their problem solved, they can get the information they need, they can continue on with their mission. And so, I'm excited about all of that. I think we have a really bright future ahead of us on the technology side, which again, 5 years ago, if you would have said Fairbanks Morse and technology, the Venn diagram would have been like two baseballs, right? 6 inches apart. And now, you have a nice little overlap there, and we'll continue to grow that in the future. We've got a great team in place on that.
Spectacular. And I've had the privilege of working with many of them,
Yeah.
especially in the last few years. So, I know, George, we touched on it briefly before, but most recently in September of 2024, FMD announced the deal with Rolls-Royce to acquire its naval propulsors and handling business.
Yep.
Can you take a deeper dive into that acquisition? Because on the press release, when it was announced, you said, when you look at the 150-year of Fairbanks Morse Defense, you will find a handful of distinctive moments that completely transform this company. We believe this acquisition is one of those moments. So can you kind of give a little more behind the quote and tell me a little
Yeah.
bit more about what it means?
So sure. Thanks, Greg. A couple of things on that. One, um, it's this is the propeller business. I mean, it's just one of it's like propellers and engines. I kind of think a little bit like Forrest Gump, right? Peas and carrots. They just when you think about the entirety of the powertrain, starting with the engine on one side and now getting into the propeller on the other side, to be able to offer that as a combined solution to our customers. To be able to say, hey, we can do all the design work for you. We can get that as an integrated solution and offering. It's really transformational, I think, in the market, and it just doesn't really exist today. And the Rolls-Royce business, and we will bring back and again, you've been in this business a long time, so you would recognize Bird Johnson, the name. So we are bringing back the Bird Johnson name, and it kind of goes with that legacy approach, with 150 years of Fairbanks Morse, and some of the other acquisitions that we've done with, for example, Hunt Valve, or some of these really Ward Leonard, really, really strong legacy, long-term suppliers, and just to have that as part of the brand. But this company is so big, and then the capability and the engineering and the market savviness that they bring to Fairbanks Morse, to make us just such a bigger, stronger company together. It really is transformational. This is kind of this will be the biggest acquisition that we've done. And it'll take us a while to kind of work through it, obviously. But we are really, really excited about it. And when we kind of, a year from now, 18 months from now, when we're going to be able to take a step back and we're going to say, wow, this really, changed the company for the better. The resources that we'll have for the market, the tools that we'll have for the market, are just going to be such a stronger, better company for that.
Exciting times as always.
Yeah.
So, George, I truly do appreciate your time. I can only
Yeah.
imagine what your daily calendar looks like. So I just had a couple more questions.
Sure.
Earlier this year, for an edition of Maritime Reporter, you wrote on something I know you're passionate about, and that's the U.S. Navy industrial base,
Yeah.
and not simply because you're a part of it. Can you summarize what you see today in terms of the U.S. Navy industrial base to meet the Navy's growing needs? And more importantly, what actions do you recommend to start rebuilding that base now?
Well, I'm concerned. I think as probably most everybody else in the industry is. I think there's a couple things you can draw together there. So, look at what Blue Forge is doing, with the whole build submarines, the marketing campaign that they have, and all the materials they're putting in. I think they're doing a fantastic job, right? I think that the visibility they've brought, the awareness that they've brought to the American population, with running ads, during the Super Bowl and the Final Four. They've got a NASCAR. I mean, they have a NASCAR, right? I think that's really amazing. I think there's a lot of awareness, in the market that, hey, this is a huge problem. We're in a very dangerous world right now. Iran is shooting missiles at Israel. The Houthis are disrupting trade, right? Everyone knows about Russia and Ukraine. To me, the biggest piece of all this, the biggest challenge of all this would be what happens if China actually invades Taiwan, right? There's some talk of that's a 2027 kind of timeline. That's tomorrow, right? That literally is in global timelines. That's tomorrow, and we're not ready for that, right? As the U.S. as the Navy, and so I get concerned when I see like the shipbuilding budget for 2024, where the Navy said, "Hey, we want to build 6 ships, and we're going to decommission." I think it was 19. Although I may be off a little bit on that number. And at that point in time, they said, "Well, but we'll build 10 more in 2025." Well, now over the summer, the new budget outline came out, and there's only 6 or 7 more ships for 2025. And so at a time when our Navy is shrinking, right, and our industrial base then is collapsing with that or shrinking with that, we have a Chinese Navy that's gone from 300 ships to 350 ships to greater. Now, the counter to that is always, okay, well, if you include all the allied nations, we actually have, a lot more ships, and the ships that we have are larger and more capable. And I understand that. I really do. And I think we have a world-class and the best Navy, in the world, bar none. I don't think that the Chinese can compete with this at all. But it is really concerning just on a sheer quantity of ships, and the fact that any kind of a conflict is right in their backyard, where for us it's 6,000, 8,000 miles away. And so as we kind of work through that, and we kind of combine that with what's going on with kind of build submarines and the hundreds of thousands, millions of man hours that we're short to build the equipment that we need to build, it's just got to be a concern for everybody. And so my passion on this, and I'm certainly not the only one, there's others that write about this more eloquently than myself, is that we should be doing a lot more of this work in the Midwest of the U.S. The biggest constraint that's out there, and the Navy will talk about this, and it's in Congress, is actually labor. And so, at Electric Boat, they're doing a good job of building submarines the way they can, but their constraint is labor. So they actually have to send out, and they're starting to do this, right? We just saw, just in the last couple of weeks, a big contract announcement down in Alabama. And so we're starting to see some pieces of that, but I'd like to see that everywhere, right? I'd like to see that much more broadly. One of the crazy ideas I have is we ought to have a shipyard in St. Louis that's making modules for all of the other shipyards, and you stick them on a barge and you sail them down the Mississippi River, right? I mean, there's a lot of labor there in the heartland, right? If you drive through the middle of the country, you see these Rust Belt towns where there's labor available. There's tech schools, there's trade schools, right? We can teach people how to weld. And then the shipyards that exist today really then should be transformed into assembly yards. Just like in the old days, a car plant, well, you had some guy carving, tires out of rubber, right? And you got another guy putting an engine together over here, and then you put all the pieces together. But that's not what happens, right? In a car assembly plant today, literally everything comes in, right? And you assemble the car like a box of Legos, and they're doing, 100 cars or 1,000 cars or whatever it is. And the shipyards, we don't do that. And I think the main reason we don't do that is because we don't have enough demand, right? At 6 ships, well, what's the rationale to do that? Why would we change? Huntington Ingalls has plenty of labor to do the work that they need to do today. Whatever the yard may be. But if we really want to say, hey, we got to build 20 ships a year, right? We need to build 25 or 30 ships a year. Well, where is that going to come from? And it has to really transform the way that we do business today. And in order to do that, we're going to need significantly more labor. We're going to need more money from Congress, right? So the Navy's going to have to say, hey, instead of a $35 billion shipbuilding budget, it needs to be 40 or 45 billion. But the Navy is the front line of defense, right? That's freedom of the seas, for everything that we want to do as the United States, as our country. And then it transforms the way that we build ships today. And then that has then obviously the follow-on effect to the supply chain, the industrial base, that then has to grow and be able to support that. And there's tons of companies out there like Fairbanks Morse that are really waiting for that leadership. And now what we're actually seeing is that there's a lot of grassroots efforts. So for example, a year ago, I helped launch the Wisconsin Defense and Industry Coalition, so that we can start doing. There's one in Illinois, there's one in Maine, there's one in Oklahoma, there's one in Utah. So this grassroots effort to try to build more awareness, just like the Build Submarines campaign, to say, hey, what are the other things that we can do? But none of that's really going to be successful if we don't start saying, hey, contracts have to start coming out of the big yards, out of the big primes into the industrial base. And in order for that to happen, the big primes, the big shipyards, they have to have additional contracts so that they can manage their financials, because they can't just say, oh, all this stuff we're doing today, we're just going to outsource it. Well, what are they going to do with the labor they have, right? What are they going to do with their cost structure? That doesn't work. So it really has to start with, we've got to build more ships. We've got to, we have to start there, and then the industrial base has to be able to respond to that. So I know that's a long answer, and I apologize for that, Craig, but I'm really passionate about this topic. And I'm not trying to build ships, or I don't want to build ships for the sake of building ships. I'm very concerned about the state of the world today. And it's a different world than what it was 15 or 20 years ago. Nobody thinks of China right now as a friendly, I shouldn't say nobody, but almost nobody thinks of them as a friendly country, right? And I've been there probably 20 times in my life, but I want to go today, right? I want to do that. It's very adversarial, the relationship there. It'd be great if we could try to simmer tensions down a bit, but the way to do that is really peace through strength, and we're not showing that strength today, and we really need to show that.
Just two really quick points, because I fully understand the need for the additional manufacturing capacity. I actually grew up just north of Cincinnati myself. My father was a tool and die maker for General Motors. In fact, I grew up in the town of Fairfield, and literally my parents have lived in the same house since 1960, and they live about 5 minutes from one of your recent acquisitions.
Yeah.
Every time I'm driving in and out of there, I pass it. I'm like, I almost stopped last time and did a selfie in front of it, but next time I'm there,
Oh my God.
and no,
I'm
no,
gonna
no,
be there. Great. I'll be there not next week, but the week after. So
no,
if you
that's
want a
funny. No,
tour,
I'm going back. I
absolutely.
got a wedding like mid-November, but I mean, that cracked me up. When one of your colleagues, Michelle, sent me the press release, I'm like, oh my God, I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
this
That's
company.
funny.
And and two, I hear what you say about the Navy and the capabilities, because one of the most memorable things that stuck with me, and this is years before they were firing drones and rockets at commercial ships in the Red Sea and doing everything. I actually had the privilege to be invited to the home of then CNO Gary Ruffin. And it was a discussion. It was for my subsea title. It was a discussion on unmanned underwater systems, and we had every flag admiral and every CEO from every marine robotics company. And just in a private conversation, I'm like, hey, what kind of things keep you awake at night? He
Yeah.
goes, what kind of things keep me awake is you got a 13 billion aircraft carrier out there, and you got a $20,000 asymmetric threat. That you got to deal with. He goes, there's a lot, and this is, like I said, this is long before like the drone warfare really got
Really
cranking.
took
So
off. Yeah.
I can only imagine. I know the technology and the effort that goes into that. So I share that concern with you as well.
Yeah.
Um, George, I truly appreciate your time. I just had one more question, and I know
Sure.
it's a question that every leader on pretty much every level dislikes. It's the legacy question. But when it comes time for you to pass the reins to the next generation, how would you like this era of FMD to be viewed?
I think there's two things, Greg, that I think about with that. One is, and it kind of goes to one of your original comments about the company being 150 years old. So if we go back in our history, to where we started off, we made windmills, we made scales, we made pumps, we made motors, we made engines, obviously. We just made this huge variety of products. And then in the 1960s, 1970s, the company really was, at that point in time, we were only kind of making engines. And so I think about the legacy that I would like to be able to leave is one, there's a clear focus on the customer that we have, the United States Navy, the United States Coast Guard, right? This legacy of defense, enabling freedom of the seas, how important that is. And second, going back to the original kind of mission of Fairbanks Morse. And so we're much more than just an engine company. We now have a motor company, we have a valve company, we have an elevator company. We have, all of this other capability that we've gone back to be able to add to say just kind of almost like the company that existed, more than 100 years ago. And so it's a little bit of, back to our original roots. And I think that, whoever gets this job after me, whenever that may be, hopefully they can continue to grow and expand on that, in a similar manner to what we've been able to do for the last couple of years. So yeah, it's been a really exciting and fun and busy last few years. So that's for sure.
I'm no business expert, but I suggest you might want to go into building those big console radios that I saw in your museum. And I think it was Pat
Yeah,
Busey. Some local woman had called him and informed him that
yeah,
she had it, and she's like, "You made radios?" No, we didn't. Yes, you
yeah.
did.
Yeah, exactly. TVs, radios, refrigerators, right? All of the things, coffee grinders, right? You think about all the different things that we've made, and obviously, I don't think we're going to get in the coffee grinder business, just to be clear. But historically, we just made, all of these products for your home. But it's great. Again, you're from Ohio, you're right. I actually grew up in Ohio as well, and all these Midwestern companies, what did you make? You made stuff for farms, right? Farms need power, farms need scales, farms needed all of these things Caterpillar started the same way, John Deere started the same way, we started the same way, right? All these big legacy companies, and so a little bit going back to those roots, with the exception of being instead of focusing on the farm, we're really saying, hey, we're going to focus on that core customer.
Thank you for listening to Maritime Matters. If you would like to be featured on a future Maritime Matters podcast, visit www.marinelink.com or email maritimematters@marinelink.com.